And this eternal being, whatever it may be, needed to be able to decide to cause space-time into being.
It didn't need a cause, and it also didn't need God. Ultimately, what the Kalam Cosmological argument relies on is a special pleading argument. They specially plead for their God as the answer, and they fail to even consider natural explanations that could explain all of this without the need of a God. And because they can't rule out these natural explanations, that means that their God is not necessary. Anyways, that's what we're going to be listening to tonight. If you heathens want to know more about the Kalam Cosmological argument, then please stay tuned. What's up, heathens? How you doing? So tonight we have a Christian named Jacob Pando who's going to be explaining the Kalam Cosmological argument for us tonight. And he does it in a very confusing way. And so we're going to try to feel our way through the darkness that is his argument for the Kalam Cosmological argument, because apparently atheists just can't understand this argument for whatever fucking reason. I don't know if that means that we just can't understand it, or we've willfully understood it, or fucking something like that. I'm not sure, but Jacob is here to explain it to all of us. So let's go, Jacob. I appreciate you taking time out of your, I guess, your work day, because it looks like you're calling from your job at the dealership or something. So let's see what you got.
Is the reason behind why space-time came into existence. This is the age-old question of creation. Why did anything come into existence? Okay, to begin with. Now, what allows us to ask this question? What allows us to ask this question is the very fact that science tells us that material space-time came into existence. Otherwise, if space-time had always existed, we wouldn't be asking this question.
Well, I mean, that's akin to saying, hey, if the universe didn't start, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. I don't understand how this is supposed to help us understand the Kalam Cosmological argument. I don't understand why this is really all that important to understanding any argument. This just seems like a non-statement to me.
So science allows us to ask the question, why did space-time in the Big Bang, you know how they say, before the Big Bang, there was no material space-time. And since all of reality is described by the matter that it's made out of, we know that material space-time came into existence. So what needed to exist in order for space-time to have came into existence? We know that whatever needed to exist to spark the Big Bang needed to have always existed, needed to be eternal.
Well, so his fundamental misunderstanding here comes from not realizing that there's our universe, and then there's this underlying fabric of reality that controls like shit that happens in our universe. This is where like the quantum scalar fields would be. This is Jacob's fundamental misunderstanding, because quantum scalar fields, I mean, they exist everywhere uniformly. And so as far as our universe goes, like what caused our universe to come into existence, the best explanation that we have right now is that there was a quantum scalar field that was in a false vacuum state. And then for whatever reason, no cause is even necessary for this. Just, I guess, randomly, it fluctuated from this false vacuum state to a true vacuum state. When it fluctuated from that false vacuum to true vacuum, it released a massive amount of energy. And we have scientific experiments that are repeatable and have been repeated several times that show that these quantum scalar fields can do this. When it released this massive amount of energy, it inflated into like a universe smaller, like a size smaller than what our universe is now, because after that point it kept inflating. Anyways, it released all this energy and it flooded the area with these particles called inflaton particles. And because of the second law of thermodynamics, this energy started to degrade as soon as it was released. So it releases, it starts to degrade, it transforms into what would become how we experience our universe today. Like it eventually becomes the matter that we have today. That's how that all started. It didn't need a cause, and it also didn't need God. Ultimately, what the Kalam Cosmological argument relies on is a special pleading argument. They especially plead for their God as the answer. And they fail to even consider natural explanations that could explain all of this without the need of a God. And because they can't rule out these natural explanations, that means that their God is not necessary. Until you can rule out all natural explanations for something, and it's a suspension of the natural order of reality, up until that point, you can rule out God. This is part of like Aquinas' 5 ways and the cosmological argument in general. The Kalam Cosmological argument just pretty much says that, the universe came into being, everything needs a cause, therefore God caused the universe to come into existence. Or the universe had a beginning. The very raw Kalam Cosmological argument I actually don't have a problem with. The thing is that people tack on to the Kalam Cosmological argument this idea that it proves God, specifically their particular God. This whole uncaused, unmoved mover thing that he's got here on the screen, one thing that disproves that is the fact that we've come into the realization that objects are both naturally at rest and naturally moving in a constant speed in a single direction, unless acted upon by an outside force. So both of those states are like natural states for stuff to be in the universe. We don't need an unmoved mover, as it were. The whole uncaused, unmoved mover thing is part of Aquinas' first way, and in it he speculates that things are naturally at rest and they are only moved by a mover. And since everything has been moved by a mover, there has to be some first cause or entity to start everything moving. But that was done away with when we figured out, like through Einstein and other people, that objects are just as naturally moving in a single direction at a constant speed as they are at rest. So you don't literally need an unmoved mover. And this is all of these arguments have been disproven since like the 18th century. These things have been dealt with like a lot in the past.
And this eternal being, whatever it may be, needed to be able to decide to cause space-time into being. So when there is no space-time, what do we have? If we have no material space-time, we have absolute nothingness.
You see, that's where you're wrong there, Jacob, because absolute nothingness does not actually exist. That's theoretical, but it doesn't exist in reality, because we have found that when we remove everything from a space, a section of space, it still has an electrical charge. There's literally never a pocket of just absolute nothing. So this absolute nothing wouldn't really exist. This is that underlying fabric of reality that causes shit to happen. We found that like virtual particles can pop in and out of quote unquote existence, which really it's just changing states of energy. You have to understand that the scientific nothing that we actually work with is vastly different from absolute nothing.
Okay, this means there is no time, at least based on matter. Okay, because we don't know if there is primordial time or absolute time. In other words, because it wouldn't be based on matter. So we don't know there's an absolute time. Okay,
so I think what he's talking about here is the fact that space-time came into existence when this universe came into existence. But I don't think that the fabric of reality, this underlying fabric of reality, has to exist along with space-time. Quantum physics and everything like that doesn't need space-time in order to operate, like he seems to think that it would, I guess. I don't even know if he's considering quantum theory or anything like that, but it's very difficult to drill down into what he's even fucking talking about here. I think that he really doesn't understand what he's talking about, and that's why it's a little hard to grasp what he's trying to tell us.
But to say that material space-time came into existence, there needed to exist something that always existed, that is eternal, that is independent of material space-time. So it needed to exist in some form of absolute space-time.
I don't know what absolute space-time would be. I'm guessing you're talking about like what space-time would be outside of this universe. But considering that space-time started with our universe, I would think that, it wouldn't, like, there wouldn't be an absolute space-time. I don't know, this just feels like you're pulling shit out of your ass at this point in order to explain shit. But also, like, as far as the eternal thing that exists, I don't understand why that can't be just simply the fabric of reality. Like, reality itself is the eternal thing that exists. I would really love for you to be able to distinguish between this underlying fabric of reality and your God. The difference is that the underlying fabric of reality is just something that exists naturally and is therefore governed by whatever natural laws govern it. It wouldn't have like a mind of its own or anything like that. You seem to think that a conscious being is needed to make the decision to create the universe, when we have a natural explanation for how this universe could have come into existence. That also means that our universe may not be the only universe out there. There could be other universes out there that do exist, that are vast distances away from us. I don't even know how that would work. But the point of the matter is that you jump to the conclusion that God had to be the one to do it, or this special supernatural entity. You're specially pleading for your God.
And this is what we call the uncaused, unmoved mover, okay? Because it hasn't been unmoved. It's not what's being moved. It's what causes the moving. It's what causes every other cause in the universe that led up to this point in time.
He may get into infinite regresses here in a minute. If he does, I don't understand why infinite regresses can't exist. Like, infinite is not like a real number or anything like that. It's just a very, very large number. But, saying that there can't be an infinite regress backward kind of implies that there can't be numbers, that go off forever, right? Like, can you tell me what the largest number is? I mean, it's the exact same thing as saying that there can't be an infinite regress. Is there some kind of cap on numbers in general? Like, is there just some largest number that numbers just don't exist past that number? I don't see a good argument that there's like a top or a bottom to this set of real numbers, right? It just goes off into infinity, which just means really, really big number. So I just don't understand why an infinite regress is impossible. But even so, I don't think that even if infinite regresses weren't possible, I don't think that means that God has to exist. I think that it could definitely be traced back to a quote unquote first cause that's a natural cause.
So this is what the argument from creation. The uncaused, unmoved mover, the one who moves things. Okay, it's not moved by anything else. Otherwise, if we do not have such an eternal entity, then we're led to an assumption of infinite regressions, infinite causes that continue on forever. And as we could see, based on what we do see of material space-time, is that everything did have a cause. Things couldn't have continued in causation.
Except for your God, because your God's special. He's just highlighting how specially pleading it is. To say that everything in this universe needs a cause, except my God. You can't get any more blatant about a special pleading argument than that. If everything in this universe and in this reality has a cause, then your God also has a cause. Otherwise, it's a special pleading argument.
Because of theories like the heat death, where entropy reaches a maximal point, where thermodynamics comes into play and all of heat dies out. All the heat in the universe, from a fireplace to the gases that form the sun, all the heat in this entire universe, no matter how big it is, will die out one day. And that's why we know that the sun has an age. The universe as a whole has an age. It hasn't always existed.
The heat death of the universe is how we know things have ages? I feel like we know things have ages because space-time exists, not because the heat death of the universe is slowly approaching. It's true that there will be a heat death of the universe. I don't think that really gives us any kind of indication about like when the universe began or anything like that. I mean, we can probably guesstimate when the heat death of the universe is going to be. I'm sure that there's actually a guesstimation out there. The heat death will occur in 10 to the 100 years if protons decay. Usually the logarithmic scale is used for such timelines, but it compresses the most interesting Stelliferous era too much, so it's still a long ways away. I don't understand what the point in bringing up the heat death of the universe is. Atheists and scientists, more so scientists than like anything to do with atheism or the God question, would admit that the universe had a beginning. What we don't agree with you on is the idea that God had to be the one to create the universe. I mean, scientifically minded people think that the universe naturally came into existence. Until you can prove any kind of supernatural thing to happen, the natural explanations are going to be the most likely explanation that is true. Your special pleading for a God is just not going to work on anything, in anybody, or at least it shouldn't work on anyone.
We see that the universe is expanding at a much faster rate, okay, than previously predicted. To throw out theories like the Big Bounce, for example, which says that the universe will eventually contract. It'll expand and then it'll slow down as it expands to contract. Okay, but we don't see that. The very fact that the universe is actually expanding without any signs of decreasing, and it's just actually increasing in the rate that it is expanding, proves that the Big Bounce is a hoax. The contraction, the idea of the universe contracting is a hoax. Okay.
Well, hoax is it's not a hoax. You using the word hoax here is really disingenuous because it's not a hoax. I just think that maybe you don't understand what hoax means. That's the only way that I can figure that you would call it a hoax. It is a hypothesis, and I would say that it's probably the least likely correct hypothesis out of the multiple hypotheses that are out there about, the universe and everything. This big crunch, or the big bounce, as you say, it still has some premises in it that are not exactly, they haven't been proven. There's not a solution for them yet. Like, for instance, one of those things is the reverse of entropy. We don't know of any kind of natural process that would reverse entropy. We don't know how to overcome that, so that's why it's the least likely one, but it's still a possibility, I guess. There are multiple different ideas about what will happen. I mean, the heat death of the universe, it just being like that, and that's it, could be one of them. Multiple universes is also a very plausible one. There's the whole bubble universe thing. You're presenting this one particular hypothesis, calling it a hoax when it's never taught or discussed as anything but a hypothesis. You're discussing it like it's the proposed scientific explanation that is the best scientific explanation for things, and it's just not.
So the other theory is that the universe will split itself apart. It'll destroy itself, making an empty void. And that's also proof, or a theory that proves that this universe isn't eternal, isn't infinite. Okay, it isn't infinite. Now, when it comes to the second law of thermodynamics, which basically, in the most elementary way to put it, says that matter is neither created or destroyed, it's talking about the system itself, the universe itself, the way it is at this very moment in time. All the matter that we see, whenever the fire, for example, in my examples before, when the fire burns out, the ashes or whatever remains of that fire is still there. Okay, the fire is heat, but whatever it burns up, the matter, it just diverts into a more random state of entropy.
Jacob here is saying really nothing of any kind of substance. He's trying to explain the second law of thermodynamics to us without really explaining the second law of thermodynamics, because the second law of thermodynamics is about how energy degrades over time, or how entropy increases. Let's just take the sun, for example. The sun radiates photons. These photons, whenever they hit something like the earth, they transfer a little bit of energy to the earth, and a little bit is reflected back, right? That's what we end up seeing with our eyes. This transfer ends up being heat, right? That's why shit gets hot when it's sunny outside, right? So it transfers as heat, and then this heat dissipates, and the energy lessens, or entropy increases. The energy ends up dissipating. Basically, what's happening here is that the universe is seeking a stable state, and that stable state is equal to zero energy. That's why it's called the heat death of the universe, because eventually our universe is going to get to this stable state of zero energy. And so that's where we're heading to. Cernian in the chat did correct me, not saying not zero energy, thermal equilibrium. I don't know how this exactly factors into the Kalam cosmological argument or why he's bringing up his fire example here.
So it's a chemical change. It's a mere chemical change. It's not going anywhere. Matter still remains. But before the Big Bang, we cannot say the same.
Matter can't be created or destroyed, true. But it's more about like the energy of the universe, right? That's what the second law of thermodynamics is about.
We cannot say the same for what was before the system of space-time came into existence. We're talking about a time when the laws of thermodynamics, when the laws of physics break down, when the laws that we refer to, they actually break down because they're no longer applicable. All right.
So what he's discussing here right now is our own understanding of the laws of physics. These are human descriptions of what we perceive in reality. Now, there are certain situations that we know of where the laws of physics break down. One of those situations is the beginning of the universe. Another one of those is near the event horizon of a black hole. These laws of physics, when they get into these special situations, they don't hold anymore. Reality operates differently at those points in time. So we don't know how reality is going to operate in these other special situations like, black holes in the beginning of the universe. We don't know how they're going to operate exactly. Once we can observe them, we can then describe them and we will know, how they operate.
So be ready for part 2 of this segment, because I'm sure I'm going to have a lot of critics and people who try to criticize the facts that I present here. But prepare for a part 2 of this segment, and you have a blessed day.
Thank you there, Jacob. I appreciate you there, buddy. So that was Jacob's video. I hope you guys liked it. I would really love to hear y'all's thoughts on this. I'm sure that I butchered some of the science on this. I was really working off of memory, and sometimes my memory's shoddy. So please forgive me for any minute details I might have gotten wrong. I'm sure all of you will let me know down in the comments what I fucked up. It usually happens in these situations. If you will, leave me a comment down below with what you thought about Jacob's argument, regardless of my shitty regurgitation of basic science. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought about him trying to defend the Kalam cosmological argument. Let me know what you think about the Kalam cosmological argument. I'd really love to hear what you guys think, so please leave those comments down below, and I will do my best to respond to any that are down there. Other than that, I hope you guys have a lovely weekend, and I will see y'all later. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.